The African-American Legend series highlights the accomplishments of blacks in areas as varied as politics, sports, aviation, business, literature, religion, and the arts. We will explore how African Americans have succeeded in areas where they've been previously excluded because of segregation, racism, and lack of opportunity. I'm your host, Dr. Roscoe C. Brown, Jr., and with us today is Kenneth Knuckles, the CEO of the Upper Manhattan Empowerment Zone. Hi, Ken.
Roscoe,
I should call you Kenneth Knuckles.
Kenneth Julius Knuckles, if you want to be precise.
Okay, very good.
But Ken will do. Thank you.
Okay, your work as the CEO of Upper Manhattan Empowerment Zone is really very important and really very arduous because you're coming into a situation over 2 years where there's been a lot of movement, a lot of change. So tell us a little about the current direction of the Upper Manhattan Empowerment Zone, and maybe just tell the public, the audience, what the Empowerment Zone is.
Okay. Well, I was here approximately 27 months ago when you were gracious enough to invite me upon my assumption of the duties of CEO. And since then, we have invested almost $43 million in loans and grants. And we have invested that capital pursuant to a strategy that we have. And that strategy, Roscoe, is essentially four-pronged. We want to continue the momentum we have with anchor retail projects. Mm-hmm. Anchor projects meaning projects of a certain size and magnitude that will not only bring about capital, but will create jobs as well as attract ancillary kinds of development to the area.
An example?
An example is the Harlem USA project.
Mm-hmm. That was one of our first.
That was one of your first. Opened in 1999. We provided about 20% of the funds. That was a catalytic project, and by that I mean that project, I believe, gave a signal to the larger investment community that investment in Upper Manhattan was a sound investment. So since the advent of Harlem USA, we have had no less than 3 commercial office projects in the 125th Street corridor. We have the Gotham Plaza Project, which is between, I believe, Lexington Avenue and 3rd. And we have the Gateway Project, which is at 125th Street in Lexington. And diagonally across the street from me at 125th Street and Lenox Avenue is the Harlem...
it's where Marshall's is located.
It's where Marshall's is, and I'm forgetting the name for a moment, but it's a major project developed by Forest City Ratner and the Abyssinian Development Corporation. In which a state agency has several floors, and then there is private tenants on the top floor. What this means in the aggregate is that you bring thousands of people into the corridor. The economic development impact is not only felt with the area of job creation, but it also means that more people are in the corridor to spend their money with the businesses. So when you create 800 or 900 jobs, which has happened with these several projects, you create jobs, you have people coming out during the day hours to spend, and the economic impact of that is positive with regard to the local business. So we want to continue to do that. Thus, we pursue at this time not 1, but possibly 2 hotel projects. Mm-hmm. There's a project planned in which there would be a Marriott hotel at the intersection of 125th Street and Park Avenue, about 60,000 square feet of retail, more than 100,000 square feet of commercial office space, plus about a 200-room hotel. This is diagonally across the street from the 125th Street station.
Now, how much is the investment of the Empowerment Zone in that project?
We are still negotiating with the state and calibrating the numbers, but I would suspect that it will be a combination of our triple tax exempt bonds as well as debt. Mm-hmm. So you may see $25 to $30 million in bonds, maybe a little more, and you will probably see maybe $10, $12 million in debt that we will issue. Who are the developers? The developer is Michael Caridi, operating under the name of Magic Partners. I think it's MAJICC. And he has been at this endeavor for about 2 years. But on the heels of that, there is an RFP that's outstanding for the old Loews Victoria, which is just down the street from the Apollo. The state put out an RFP.
The state owns that building?
The state owns that building. And the Empire State Development Corporation put out an RFP last fall asking for use for that building. And the responses have been basically along the lines of a boutique hotel along with condominiums. So the 125th Street corridor is very, very active and certainly the object of a lot of planning. So that's the kind of anchor development that we think we ought to facilitate, because with that, not only do you create jobs, but as those projects come online, you will see other kinds of development that will follow to service those kinds of projects. So that's one prong of our investment strategy. A second prong, equally important, is our small business development strategy, in which we lend through our BRISC program, which we've resurrected. That was dormant for a few years, but now we've resurrected that.
It's a program to lend money to small businesses.
Small businesses between $50,000 and $250,000. So we've got that up and running. We just issued 2 loans not long ago, and we expect more in the pipeline. But more importantly, we also have a micro lending program in which we work with local partners, in this case Axion, which is one of the best micro lenders. Micro is defined as loans that are generally under $10,000. We're working with them. We started in East Harlem with a $500,000 grant. More than $400,000 of that has been lent already. And we believe that we want to expand that program into Harlem, Washington Heights, and Inwood. So that's a very important strategy, because aside from job creation, we want to help bring about the stabilization of businesses and even some wealth creation, where entrepreneurs who have invested time and money in businesses can grow to another level. Our third prong is the Cultural Investment Industry Fund. As you know better than most people, the artistic history of Harlem and Upper Manhattan is a rich one. We have some of the best known artistic groups in the world: Dance Theater of Harlem, Boys Choir of Harlem, the Studio Museum, El Museo del Barrio. Well, these institutions are important not only for artistic expression, but they bring almost 2 million people into Upper Manhattan every year. So it's important that they grow as well. We're working with them, but we're also working with a second tier of artistic groups. Under the rubric of the Harlem Arts Alliance, for instance, you have 200 or 300 smaller organizations. Classical Theater of Harlem, for instance, the Hadley Players. There is several groups in East Harlem that Raíces, which means roots, has probably the greatest collection of Latin music in the world. So we think that there is great potential in the cultural economy uptown, and we want to continue to develop that. The fourth area is workforce development, in which we've got to have a strategy to enable people to obtain the jobs that we're creating. So we have done workforce development over the last several years. We've placed more than 1,600 people in jobs. Most recently, we worked with the city in developing a job training module so that Dinosaur Barbecue, for instance, over on 131st Street and 12th Avenue, a new restaurant, we helped facilitate the training of about 50 or 60 people. So 30 to 35 people who live in the zone have jobs at Dinosaur Barbecue. So that's the strategy that we're pursuing. As I said, we've invested, since I've gotten there, almost $43 million. Over the 10 years of the zone, we have invested more than $143 million.
Now, as I understand it, when the empowerment zone was created under the leadership of Congressman Rangel, it was $300 million over 10 years, 100 from the city, 100 from the state, and 100 from the feds.
Right.
How has that worked out?
Well, it's worked out well. Our portion, UMEZ, Upper Manhattan Empowerment Zone, our portion turned out to be about 250 million because
there's
51 million
part that goes to the Bronx.
Goes to the Bronx. They have their own local development corporation. So of the 250 million that we had, when you back out expenses, administrative expenses, because we have a lean staff, but there's a staff to pay, there is office rent to pay, there's utilities, et cetera. We had a net of $212 million to invest. And of that amount, we have invested over $143 million. So by my arithmetic, and you're probably a better mathematician than I am, but it's about $84 million left.
Now the time period, I believe, for the empowerment zone was something like
10 years.
10 years, from
94 to 2004. But fortunately, in the calendar year 2000, I believe with the facilitation of the congressman, because nothing happens in Washington relating to us that he doesn't facilitate, our statutory period was extended through December 31, 2009. So we have a little more than 4 years to invest the remaining capital that we have, which is about 85 million.
Now the geographical parameters of the zone are from Washington Heights, 175th Street, to
Actually,
East
the
Harlem.
northernmost, because the zone, juts in and out. But essentially, it encompasses all of East Harlem.
East Harlem from
96th Street up to 132nd Street. Takes in most of Central Harlem, but you don't have Convent Avenue, Strivers Row, and some of the more affluent areas, but you have certainly the commercial corridors. Central Harlem up through Washington Heights. The northernmost point is actually in Inwood at 218th and Broadway.
Well, how do you work out the politics of making sure enough money goes to Inwood and enough money goes to East Harlem? Because I know some of the earlier criticism that practically all the money was going to 125th Street.
Yeah, which was not true, but because of the visible and large projects, people could very easily have that assumption. Well, first of all, the empowerment zone's money, as you know, having been a former board member, is invested pursuant to submissions of projects, and ideas. So in order to get what most people would believe to be an equitable distribution, we have heard that criticism and that critique. So we have gone into East Harlem and Washington Heights and continue to do so, to talk with people, to provide technical assistance to entrepreneurs, the micro lending. The reason why we started it in East Harlem in Washington Heights is because those areas, for lots of different reasons, we haven't had the traction in those areas that we had in Central Harlem. So you go in to the communities. You don't wait for proposals. You go and try to stimulate interest and ultimately proposals for us.
To what extent have you been involved in the healthcare industry?
We have not made any direct healthcare industry investments, but we have a very significant endeavor going on as we speak. A board member of mine, Ray Lenevsky, is one of the city's experts in workforce development and job training. I have had discussions with the CEOs of all of the private hospitals with a presence in Upper Manhattan. So that's Mount Sinai, that's Continuum Healthcare, Stan Brezhnev, St. Luke's Roosevelt, that's one of the hospitals there. Sam Daniels at North General, as I said, Ken David at Mount Sinai, and we've had discussions at Columbia Presbyterian as well. We want to develop a workforce module around the healthcare industry, because the healthcare industry probably has 300,000 to 400,000 jobs in the city, and it is by far the largest employment sector in Upper Manhattan. So the hospitals will have different issues among them, but healthcare is something that we need and will always be there. So we are working right now with the 4 CEOs and their human resource people, planning, looking at, first of all, where their vacancies are, where do they have difficulty attracting people, and what kinds of training can we do to produce a potential workforce for them. And how this differs, I think, from past approaches is that we are letting, to a greater degree, the employers shape the job training agenda. I think historically it's been about job readiness, which certainly is important and must continue. You know, getting to work on time, wearing a shirt and tie, dressing appropriately, looking people in the eye, having a good attitude, all of that is certainly a prerequisite. But we also need to have a targeted strategy around where jobs are and are going to continue to be.
Well, the healthcare industry is really going to take a hit because of the state budget.
True.
You're talking about closing hospitals, curtailing staff. So how do you work your workforce development in that climate? And of course, you have the unions, particularly 1199 and in part DC 37, working in that area. The empowerment zone contribution would be in the form of lending money or providing grants for training. How would you go about that?
Providing grants for training. And you're right about the fiscal outlook, which is why we have focused on the private hospitals as opposed to the public hospitals.
But they're talking about closing both the public and the private.
They're talking about closing both of them, but our assumption is that however diminished some may be, they will continue to exist, and they will still need people. So there are administrative positions, there are technician positions that need to be filled and occupied on an ongoing basis. So we will be planning strategy with them, and as it relates to the union presence, to the degree that these jobs are union jobs, then these people should be prepared to join the union workforce. I think unions want more members.
I know 1199 has a very intensive training program, which was largely funded by state monies.
Right.
Looking at housing, what are we doing in housing?
Well, we don't do housing. We focus on commercial and retail development, cultural investment to strengthen the tourism market, small business lending, and workforce development. If we were involved in housing, I think we'd be yet another not-for-profit going after too few dollars. But Harlem, as you know, is undergoing a housing boom. There is subsidized development that's bringing about housing that has affordability as a part of it, but there's also a private market. So with thousands and thousands of families coming back into Harlem and Upper Manhattan, there needs to be retail. There needs to be a strong cultural environment. And obviously there needs to be job creation so that people who are coming into Harlem to live, and even more so the indigenous folk who have been there through the good times and bad, they need to be employed. So we think that's a niche that has not been sufficiently addressed in the past, and I think that's really why the empowerment zone was conceived.
Are you working with some of the developers? Because as they develop projects, I'm sure some of them have ground floor space.
Yes.
They are mixed-use situations.
Exactly.
Now, do you provide any economic support for some of those mixed-use facilities?
Indeed, we do. Strivers Plaza, which is just nearing completion over on 135th and 8th Avenue, which was developed in part by the Greater Harlem Chamber of Commerce. We provided a loan for the developer to build out commercial space, a project over on 116th Street, 1400 on 5th. We are providing a loan for a restaurant that will go in there. So we do impact mixed-use projects, but only on the commercial side and retail side.
Given that you're in business until 2009, I believe it is, what about the loans? Because some of the loans might go for 10 or 20 years. How are we going to get that money back, or when it comes back, or is it going to go back into economic development?
We are receiving funds in the form of debt service that we have lent in the past, and those funds are being recycled into projects. We try to structure our lending, and in some cases it may go out beyond 2009, but for the most part our loans are between 5 and 7 years. So
So when you get that money back, do you then lend it again?
Recycle it.
But if your deadline is 2009, are you going to be able to go past that?
Well, we'll have to look at what the future should be and what should be the sequel, as it were, to the empowerment zone. But I think we'll have some ideas about that.
Okay, now how would you explain to the public the benefit of the empowerment zone? What has it done for Harlem?
Well, what it's done for Harlem is brought more services and brought more jobs.
What services?
Retail services. Before the Harlem USA project, you didn't have a Modell's, you didn't have an Old Navy, you didn't have a Magic Johnson Theater, you didn't have a Human bookstore, and you didn't have a Siemens Furniture in the Gotham Plaza building. So Harlemites, East Harlemites, people in Washington Heights had to go to New Jersey to shop.
That's not totally true. There were some furniture stores, there were some galleries and so
we didn't
on.
have
and one of the concerns is some people feel that they were displaced.
Well, Harlem USA did not displace anyone.
Yeah, because
what we are doing, I think the thrust of the empowerment zone is to add choices. Of course, this is not to demean the business presence that was there before the empowerment zone by any means, but I think most people would agree that there was an insufficient lack of choice. So we bring about more services, we bring about more choices, and we bring about jobs for the inhabitants of the empowerment zone. Our money is tied to job creation. If you don't agree to a quota of jobs, and that's what it is, because
for people from the community or just jobs?
Exactly. Upper Manhattan empowerment zone residents.
Because there's a tax credit that they get when they hire people who
There's a
live in the
wage
zone.
tax credit that you can utilize as an employer, $3,000 per employee, that would run through the life of the zone. So there are incentives. There's also an accelerated depreciation for equipment that you buy. So there's all sorts of incentives to stimulate your hiring UMass residents, but the ultimate incentive is our capital. Because if we're looking for at least $35,000 to create a job. So if we don't get that or something approximating it, then we're really going to look elsewhere.
What about minority ownership of some of these new businesses? How's that coming along?
Well, it's coming along fine. If you look at our restaurant initiative, for instance, virtually all of the new restaurants that have come online in Harlem over the last decade have come with some form of assistance from the empowerment zone. Just happens to be that restaurants are a very strong entrepreneurial impulse of uptown residents. So you see Amy Ruth's, you see Londell's, you see Bayou. All of these restaurants have come online with some assistance from us. So we'll continue to invest in viable projects. But there have been other kinds of projects as well. The small business lending is really targeted to local entrepreneurs, most of whom are minority, to help them grow their businesses. But aside from capital, there is also the provision of technical assistance. So between those two approaches, we believe that we are strengthening the business community, such with the departure of the zone, we will have a legacy of a stronger and more stable business community, as well as a cultural infrastructure.
How does someone who's viewing the program get in touch with the zone, find out about the projects, find out how to submit proposals, etc.?
Well, there's two ways. First, our phone number is 212-410-0030. Again, 212-410-0030. Our offices are located at 290 Lenox Avenue, also known as Malcolm X Boulevard. We're on the southeast corner of 125th Street and Lenox Avenue. Our offices are on the second and third floor. The second floor is where our brisk operation is, where we do small business lending. And there is a business library there, a business resource center. You can come in that Business Resource Center, utilize our library, and you can research how to start any kind of conceivable business that you would want to. So we urge people to come and visit us.
What's your website?
www.umez.org.
And on that website, they'll find out some of the same information.
Full array of our services. And Roscoe, if I could, I just want to say to the audience, although I'm sure that they are familiar with it by now, that we lament the passing of our esteemed chair,
Certainly.
Johnny E. Cochran, Jr. Aside from being maybe America's best-known lawyer, Johnny was the chairman of the Upper Manhattan Empowerment Zone, and served ably for 3.5 years.
He did certainly a great job.
He did a great job. He hired me, among other things.
But we won't talk about that.
We won't talk about that. Well,
today on African American Legends, we've been talking with Kenneth Knuckles, who's the CEO of the Upper Manhattan Empowerment Zone. Thanks for being with us today, Ken.
thank you.